No.
Now.
Question.
Okay. So my name is Thatcher LeCare.
I'm Xander Salick.
I'm Peter Cheng.
And we are conducting this interview on May 12th, 2021 in the US over Zoom. That's the date for us.
We are 13 here in Malaysia.
Okay, so our first question, in the pre-interview, we talked a little bit about where you were born, specifically in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Could you describe a little bit about what your childhood was like as you were growing up? Like what the neighborhoods were like, the areas surrounding it?
Okay. Like I said, I was born in Pantai Kundor. Okay, you may still have the name there in your on the last chat. My father was a fisherman, and he owned 3, we call it kelong or fishing stacks out at sea. And we used to run around the place where my father dug a pool where you catch live fish and put it in there. Okay. The episode that I can remember during that period of time when I was below 5 years old, I got stung by jellyfish when I go into the sea. And when I came out to cleanse myself from the seawater, I was stung by a wasp on my head. So I suffered 2 pains, one below my belt and one on top of my head. Okay, so it was quite painful in a way anyway. The surrounding area where I grew up actually is like quite a very rural areas, okay, not developed at all. We live in a neighborhood, a mixed neighborhood where there's Chinese and Malays, okay? So it's just like a village area. Other than that, I can still remember behind our house, there's a hill. On the top of the hill, there is a monastery. You know, monks are there. The nuns are there also. Okay, that's the early part. Next question.
So you mentioned how like your neighborhood was like mixed Chinese and mixed Malay.
Yeah.
Was there like an ethnic tension there?
Okay, that period of history in Malaysia, or that time was Malaya. There was no racial tension. Okay, we more or less mixed very well. In fact, very friendly, and we play with each other, and maybe run around and do things like young people do at that time. So the tension was caused by politicians, nothing to do with the people. Okay, so other than that, not much to add actually, because everybody goes around doing their own things, you know, in their own household. And we do meet, is out in the playing field kind of thing, running around, maybe playing ball or playing games that we more or less invented ourselves, because we have no money to buy toys like you guys do. All right, no modern amenities to think about and go or be on the internet kind of thing. That time, completely zero, like I said before. There was no radio, there was no television, and I think there wasn't even telephones in our village. Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned that you were playing like a few games as you were growing up. Did you have like a favorite game that you can remember that you enjoyed the most?
Oh, well, few of them actually. We make guns out of wood. All right, and we tie rubber band, and we pluck cherries and pull it back and shoot like as if you are shooting your toy guns right now. The other one is we catch spider and we have spider fight among ourselves, see who wins. Okay, and what else can I remember? The other one is putting more or less like cigarette boxes. When you finish with the cigarette, there's a box, remember. We used to collect cigarette boxes, put in your bit and everybody put in their bit a number of boxes, and we use our slipper to try and hit this, and see who wins the most. The other one is goldfish. We catch goldfish and we have goldfish fight. The one that I remember the best would be there was a bit older then, we make our own arrows, bow and arrows. And we shoot into the coconut trees at the coconut. And if it more or less go deep enough, we have coconut water coming down, all right, especially young ones. There was an incident actually with this bow and arrow, which I remember vividly, when we shoot up into the air, but we forgot anything that goes up will come down, and it hit somebody's on the leg. And that scared the shit out of us actually, out of me, because I was the one that shot the arrow. Okay. That's it. Most significant part of the toys that we have. Is a hand. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So you said you came from your grandfather or your father was a fisherman, right?
Yep.
And you said your mother was a housewife.
Yes.
Was your house like very large at all, or?
It was quite a sizable house, where my parents used to invite relatives over at times to celebrate certain, what they call these ceremonies. And there are enough rooms and space in the house to more or less house them. But regarding this house in Pantai Kundor, during the more or less the war, the Second World War, when the Japanese were in our country, they came more or less like stay in our house as well, catch hold of the only chicken that we have, for the food. And one thing vividly my mother shared with me was during this period of the war, some atrocities by the Japanese were not very good. I mentioned about the monastery on behind the hill. Some of the priests or nuns have been more or less used as target practices during that time. So I wasn't born yet. Those are stories that are related to me. My brother more or less had to attend Japanese school during that period. In 1943, 1942, 1943, 1944, around that period. So I heard that you want to know more about the 1950s to 1960s. All right? 1950s to 1960s. That period, our country is not called Malaysia, it's called Malaya. Right? And that time was still under colonial rule, okay, until 1957 when we get independent. When the war ended, there was still a lot of fight going on between the communists and the government, the British government. This one goes on from 1945 till about 1960. But the war with the communists doesn't end until 1989 when they signed the peace treaty. You know? Although our peace came around 1960, but we still have communist insurgency in the country. They're still trying to take over. So 50s were more or less relatively bearable. Schools were open. I went to school in 1954, primary school until 1959, the year before. And when we gained independence, in 1957, more or less, we were called Malaysia at that time. And let's see. And during that period, actually from 1950 to 1960, we call it the Malacca was one of the black areas, where communist activities was very frequent. We are one of the countries, one of the states. And just to go back a little bit, Malacca is one of the strict settlements of the British. The other being Penang state and Singapore at the time. Singapore is also under British colonial rule at that time. The period during that time was the British government at that time, to counter the communist terrorists. They have a program to gather all those inhabitants along the jungle fringes and put them into barbed wire camps, because the communists rely on sympathizers to give them food and recruitment. Okay, that is the 1950 to 1960s period. Okay, that's covered a bit.
Yeah, so what was it like in Malaysia to get like independence?
Well, we actually did not fight or have bloodshed to gain our independence. It was kind of negotiation. I think at that time, the British was more or less beginning to pull back from the Far East, from the East and South Asia, which is India, Pakistan. Not like the what they call is bloodshed occur in Indonesia. The Indonesian fought for the independence from the Dutch at the most similar period. And the British left behind a very good, I would say, structure of administration and education. We were all taught in English because of this inheritance of the British era. It's only now that it's in the national language, Bahasa Malaysia. But we still have English being taught in school. Higher education here are more or less in English in this country. That's why we have no problem coming here and speak English.
So then, would you say that the British left in place like a administrative structure that just was ready to be inherited then?
Yeah, we inherited that one more or less. They have a good infrastructure. We'll call it administrative structure, where they have a hierarchical approach to it, like England, where they have monarchy. We have also our own monarchy. But instead of one family, there are 9 families in Malaya. And they take turns to become the king of Malaya every 5 years. They take turns to change over within the 9 states. But to us, as citizens of the country, we pay taxes, and we have to support 9 royal families and their dependents. So it's a very big weight to carry.
So the monarchy in Britain is like a kind of like a figurehead now. does the Malaysian
Yeah.
monarchy retain any power?
Yeah, England is a monarchy, is a figurehead. They got no political, what they call this, power, I would say, same as this country. But there's certain things that the state that has the royal family, they control over, I would say, religion. Islam they control. And I don't know, I think land to a certain extent. Other than that, they got no say in any aspect of running the state or country. Yep. Patrick, you're quiet. Okay, what's next?
So you were talking about learning English in school.
Yeah.
Did you encounter any difficulties yourself while you were learning English? Like, were there any teachers who were, I don't know, difficult, or were there any challenges to learning it?
Not really. I'm not like any school going children. You go to school, you learn more or less by repeating, more or less in a way, of how to learn. It's just like you learn the mathematics or arithmetic at that time is by repetition. You know, you say your timetable over and over again. Uh, I cannot remember about encountering any difficulties about learning the language. And during that period of the primary school itself, national language was introduced in the 5th year. You know, primary school is 6th year. We introduced the national language on the 5th year. And we have to learn the Bahasa. Yeah. And it just comes as another process of learning, I guess, another language. You know? No difficulty at all.
So
You
then
you
while
can
you were
understand,
in
then I have problems.
so then while you were in school, was it like the classes were taught in English and then like you just talked amongst yourself in like Malay or something?
No, at that time, beginning of primary school, we learn and speak in English. No national language during the first 5 years.
So like you weren't allowed to speak it?
Say again?
So you weren't allowed to speak it, or it was
No,
like all English?
all English, except that, like I shared before, we have Chinese have their own dialect, you know, and our Malay, more Malay friends or classmates, they can speak in Malay, and that's where we pick it up along the way. So it's a mixture. Other than the mainstream of instruction was English, but we speak our own dialect, and we speak with Malays in their own language as well. So it's a
Did that
mix.
did that did that create like a language barrier at all for like talking to classmates?
Not really. In fact, if you have difficulty understanding them because of the dialect, because we speak in different dialects, we go back to English. You know? It's just like now, because the early batch of people like us, we go to English school. And now a lot of them are going to Chinese school. Okay? Because the mainstream school here are taught in Malay, English minimal, you know. So a lot of them are going to Chinese school or private school where instructions can be Chinese, private school can be English. You know? So it's still English being taught here as well. There's no shutdown on that part.
So I know that here in America, depending on what language you speak, you're sometimes encouraged to continue trying to speak that language at home with your family in order to get everybody used to it. did you do something similar with English or any of the other languages you were learning at that time?
Okay. In school, we learn English. We go back, I speak my dialect to my parents. All right? And I am the only one in my village at that time in school, in English school. The rest of my friends are in Chinese school. You know? So we more or less like interchanges, and along the process, I learn a bit of Chinese. They learn a bit of English, you know? And with our Malay neighbor, we speak in Malay when we bring up that thing, that kids time, you know? Yeah, so we change. At home, we speak our dialect. In school, we speak the school language, English. In America, you have Spanish, you have French, right? You, any one of you, more or less, talk for any one of these languages? Other than English? I pose you a question.
Well, for a while I was taking Spanish, but I stopped this year. So
It's a nice
Um,
language, Spanish, yeah. No?
so did that continue like all throughout secondary school too then?
Yeah. Secondary school is still English, but now we have a little bit more emphasis on national language, Malay. Other than that, the others are all science subjects, you know, mathematics, chemistry, biology, but it's all taught in English anyway.
Were there like British like remnants in secondary school, like from the British education system?
Initially, yes, but there was a program where a lot of Malaysians were sent to England to more or less become teachers. Okay, some were sent to England, and locally, government also established a lot of training centers for teachers, because new country, you need a lot of teachers, because there's a lot of children to be educated. Okay.
Did you take anything in like secondary school that influenced your like decisions in life?
I do not know actually. I can't remember. Actually, why I joined the military is because of a recruiting team that came to our school in our final year. We gave a talk on life in the military. You know, basically the talk is, it's a good life. You got free uniform, free food, everything, and you're paid so much a month. At that time, we are still poor, so there's so much a month is quite attractive at that time. So I joined. Not out of anything, but to earn something for a living. Later on, I began to like what I've more or less joined for actually.
Uh, so what was like training like in the military? Was it still like overseen by like British advisors?
Yes. The training establishment at that time was more or less, the instructors were mainly British, with some Malaysian being co-opted do the job in order that they can take over when the British left the country. And the Malaysianization program took effect in 1973. All military personnel within the Malaysian government or military has to go home to England. Other than that, nothing else. I think when they leave, we have to survive on our own, I guess. and we managed quite well so far.
So then were you trained by like a British instructor or?
Okay, during the initial training, we have a mixture. Initial training in the military college was mainly physical combined with academics, you know, and a lot of more or less, I wouldn't call it bullying, you know, but we have to do a lot of things that outside the norm. You know. The training was hard in a way that its physical part was hard. The academic part, more or less, you need to survive because you have to iron your own uniform, you got to polish your own shoes. They give you a white pair of sneakers and you got to make it black and make it shine, kind of thing, you know. So white shoes, canvas, to black shoes, and you must shine. So that's a lot of work. Every day we have to polish our boots. You know. Every night there is inspection of what you've done. Not satisfied, you got to look for your kit somewhere in the parade square at night because the instructors will just chuck them somewhere, and you got to look for it back again. Physical buggeration is when you do something wrong, you be more or less do extra drill, and you have a quick, we call it change parade. We have many uniforms for certain things. You have to change uniform within 5 minutes before inspection. So that was a bit tough at times. Okay, life for me was more or less physical or withstanding the physical, what they call this training. Okay, and sometimes certain part maybe mental because you're being bullied all the time by the seniors, you know. You got no time for yourself. I guess it happened in the United States military establishments also, you know, basically. It's a kind of tradition, I guess, all over the world. You know, that the seniors or the first comers will have the privilege of giving back to those who come after them because they have received it, so they pass it on. It's kind of tradition.
Do you think that like helps shape your like personality?
Very much so, actually. As you can see, by going to the military more or less probably around your age, not very wise to the world as yet. And when you come out after about 6 months, they make you a man, like they say, you know, you got to do and know everything that you're supposed to know, even though you don't know, you're supposed to know. And I recall that when I was sent to England for training, not long after my military college, I was on a plane that's full of British personnel who are like going back for holiday or something like that, a change of station. Can you hear me? And I'm the only Asian on board, you know, only Asian looking guy on board. Well, like you said, you come up a man, you manage whatever you can. And you're going to a strange land without experience anything. So they said, you are now an officer, you behave like an officer, you think like an officer, and act like an officer. So, well, I didn't get lost. Okay. So I'm doing something good.
So in the military, you kind of mentioned earlier that like you didn't have access to like the same amount of like toys that we did when you were growing up.
Yep.
In like the military, did you see like a increase in like radios and stuff?
Yes, we have military radios we could learn how to use. We got to learn the Morse code kind of thing, you know, either by light or by flags, because in a Navy ship to speak in Morse code, You do certain things with the flag they have. On land, the army were using Morse code by flashes of light. Then you can get the message, or by the number of blips you hear over the headphone. You learn all that. So I taught in school, you learn about 9 subjects or so in order to take the exam and pass. I thought after school, you don't need to learn any more of that sort. In the military, you have 12 subjects you learn to pass. And some of them you've never heard of before. So during that kind of process, education actually more or less make us a little bit more mature, I guess. Outlook of things, how to access things, how we analyze things. Like I said, you got to be an officer and got to know everything. I think that process gives us a kind of stable footing in making decisions in our life. It helps me a lot when I left the Air Force after 28 years and I work in civilian life. It helped me a lot in processing what the things I need to do, what are things I need to know, kind of thing.
So you also mentioned that Malaysia was fighting the communists for a while.
Yep.
Did you have any like missions relating to that?
Well, during that period, in the 70s rather, because late 60s and almost the whole of 70s, yeah, we were involved in our fight with the communists. On the ground, no, not really in direct contact. In the air, more or less no contact. We have to deliver more or less air support to the ground forces in the jungle. Not directly, but indirectly.
And then I do believe you were in the military while Vietnam was going on.
We are not Vietnam. Okay, during the American period, Vietnam, we are not involved.
But like, did that create any like regional tensions?
The regional tension come from the communism impact in this region actually at that time. We are facing and fighting communism. Vietnam is a communist country, fully supported at that time by China and Russia. And when the Americans tried to take over or change the country, whatever, but they couldn't. So when the Americans left, there was an exodus of Vietnamese coming across to Malaysia by sea. You know? And more or less, it's like a domino theory that once Vietnam fell at that time, they think Thailand will fall, Malaysia will fall, and Indonesia, being a communist country before, might also play a part at that time.
Did you see any like racial discrimination against the Vietnamese who were coming over by the sea?
I think we took a lot of the refugees and housed them on an island in the east coast of Malaysia. But there are a lot of things that happened at sea which is not under Malaysian control, like the Thai fishermen. You know? They take advantage of it, they rob the people, and I heard stories that some of the women folks were raped, and some of the people were killed at sea. So from what stories we hear is not very few countries accept the refugees except Malaysia. It took a lot of them. And before we repatriated them to third countries like Australia, America, maybe some to Canada and some to Europe. We housed them until the United Nations processed the whole, what they call it, repatriation program. And those that were not accepted by third countries, eventually we sent them back to Vietnam. I don't think they were more or less at that time, after so many years, they were not acted against them by the Vietnamese government.
Earlier you mentioned that you did ground support from the air.
Yeah.
What other missions did you fly?
I think that is the main mission for the ground war against the communists. Every time the have an ambush in the jungle, and our troops by the communists, the headquarters we call in either for medevac or maybe more ground troop support. We provide the air cover. If there's any indication of a target for us, we will engage the target, either using bomb, guns, and rockets, whichever is available or what we carry at that time.
Could you describe what it was like to live in like bases as opposed to like house?
So again, yeah.
Could you describe what it was like to live in like a base instead of a house?
A base is that, well, a base is like any established housing. It's just like your military base. You got family quarters, you have your administrative quarters, and whatnot. Basically, the two parts. One is the military complex, where it's all military equipment and military officers and all that. The other part is domestic housing for the officers and for the other ranks. You know? And we can even more or less build up of the golf course for your physical sporting activities. It's like any other housing complex, except that you see people going to work in uniforms instead of in civilian. Your mother was in the military housing. I got to carry her to work when our servant left us in the middle of the night. And we put her in the squadron, where I asked my pilots to look after her when I need to fly. So all my pilots know your mother. At that time, those batch of pilots, yeah. Not only your mother, I think her sister too. Yeah. And later on, the brother. I used to cycle, put her on the cycle basket in front and cycle to the squadron because it's not very far anyway.
Did you find it was like easier or not easier, but did you find because Malaysia was a newer country that was like relatively there was like nobody in the higher ranks, so promotions were more common?
Okay, that's what I thought so also during my time. I was among the first batch of pilots to be sent to the pilot squadron. Okay, and we thought that our future is a little bit brighter because we're the first batch in that particular area. And but Malaysia got a policy, all right. Malays will supersede everybody else. Although we're the first with very few Malays, quite a number of Malays from the army change trade and come over to the Air Force. Right? So even though they are not pure fighter pilots, a lot of them just came into a kind of training, short training, and then they will take over, promoted over you anyway. So my future then, I realized I'm not so bright.
Did that
But
create like
I have
did
no
that-
regrets. I have no regrets being in the Air Force. It teach me a lot.
did that like create like a sense that they didn't really know what they were doing because they came over from the army?
Most of them are into, majority of them are into the administrative job kind of thing, so it doesn't affect us very much. The fighter roles of the pilots then were well trained, so they know what they need to do. So now, more or less, the Air Force is a bit mature. The fighter pilots are now moving up in the rank, become the chief of the armed forces. Before that, it was always the army as chief of the armed forces. So this period, we have our Air Force pilot who has become the chief of the armed forces. He was with me in the squadron before, but he was the young lad. I was the old one.
Did you create any like friends that you still keep in touch with in your time in service?
Yeah, we have quite a lot of chat group among ourselves. We have a fighter chat group, and then we have another veteran chat group, and there's so many chat group actually. And we have ex-military Christian chat group kind of thing. So my time is occupied actually right now with so many chat group to look through and to answer events. So I think it helps to keep in touch with the people who work together, or some we have not worked together, but in the same period of time in the airport. And we do meet. I'll look back at the time and see how it has affected our life. We have. So you better start a chat group with me.
Did you have like a favorite place to be stationed? So I know you said you were with the 6th Squadron and the 11th Squadron, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you have like a preference?
Well, 11th Squadron was in Butterworth. There was only one-time posting for about 3.5 years. Kuantan, more or less, is 3-time posting to Kuantan. So more or less, that become a more or less permanent posting base for me. So you want to ask me favorite? I still say maybe Kuantan. That's where I met my wife.
Can you tell us that story?
Oh no.
Yes, please. Yeah, that was the next question I was going to ask, actually.
I met her in Kuantan. Okay, but she's from the same hometown as me. I get to know her when one of my friends asked me to fetch her back from hometown to Kuantan after the Chinese New Year. Okay, that's the first initial meeting. We never clicked immediately. Very much later, kind of interest grow, and before my posting to Butterworth, I asked her to marry me. All right, and she joined me in Butterworth. And for her to join me in Malaysia, Malaysia, because of my service is called essential service. The military are all essential service. And for her to follow me is quite easy because she's a spouse of a husband who is in the essential service. So most of my friends more or less married either teachers or nurses because they're all in the essential service. So easy for posting, transfer. You know? So that was in 1969. We have been married now for 52 years, I think. 52 plus years. Okay? I won't go into details. Oh my God. About my courtship.
So what was it like moving around so much, because you had to go to different places to train, such as like here in the United States and in Britain?
Okay, yeah, in Britain, my training at that time I was still a bachelor. I'm single, so there's no husband. The only time I brought my wife on posting was to the United States because it's a 1-year posting and I can bring my family. So I brought her and the 3 kids to Montgomery, Alabama. And we stayed there for about 9 months. The next 3 months was in Denver, Colorado. we traveled a bit in the States. The first weekend we went to Six Flags in Georgia. The second one we went to I think Niagara Falls. That was I think in one of the term break, 1 week. And the third one we went to Florida, Disney World. And we had experiences along the road. One time my tire burst coming back Niagara Falls, we had to change tires somewhere in Pennsylvania. The other one from Florida, we got a radiator burst. And we stopped somewhere in Pensacola, somewhere near there. And another radiator burst on the way to Colorado. So those are experiences in America, and also hailstorm in Colorado. Hailstorm, I think, is kind of phenomena, natural phenomena in America when the temperature more or less mix, super cool droplets coming down.
Do you think it was like harder on family moving around or no?
Not really. It's just like you're going on a holiday, I guess, and you bring your wife and 2 children along and a lot of bags. We went with maybe, I don't know, with 3 or 4 bags. We come back with 7 bags. We come home from America, we stop over in Hawaii kind of thing for a short holiday and then back home. Other than that, my wife followed me on some of the official duties to Indonesia. When we have joined writing exercises and joined military exercises.
So earlier you shared a story about my mother. What was it like raising kids while being in like the military?
I think it's normal like any family here with kids, I guess. You to look their requirement and the education. Earlier on when we were young, we have maids to look after them. Kind of thing. But like shared just now, the maids sometimes are not reliable. They live in the middle of the night, either because of family crisis or love crisis. They decide to say, I don't want to work anymore, kind of thing. So you're left on your own. You've got to find the solution to how to look after your kids when both of us are working at that time. So, but we did manage somehow. One period when our second daughter was born, we need to send her to my sister in Malacca for a short period of time, to tide over before we make proper arrangement. Same, just like how your mother looked after you. They have to send you to school. We send our children to school, pick them from school, send them for tuition classes, music lessons, extra lessons. Yeah. I think same for family life, same couples everywhere in the world face similar problems. So when you do get married, you face the same problem. Okay? I think you too.
So what was it like experiencing like American culture for the first time, and like did that leave any like an impact on you?
Yes. The first difference I noticed is everybody wants to eat pizza. That's what my Malaysian friends who were there before me, first meal they took us is to eat pizza. I learned that many types of pizza in the process. I think culturally, I wouldn't know the difference at that time actually. The only thing I learned is one of my US colleagues brought us as a family. He and his family brought us to eat in a restaurant. And he said, if I come 1 year before, I'm not allowed to eat in that restaurant. Because this is in the deep south, where there's a, he shared with me, there's a big segregation between the whites and the black at that time. So when I went, we were mainly at the tail end of that particular era or something, a new beginning. So yeah, culturally there may be some difference. One distinct difference I can remember now, if you are in our country, in Malaysia, in Asia, and if I am in your neighborhood, my friend's neighborhood, and I say, hey, I'm around you, can I drop in? My friend will say, no problem. I learned in America, he said no. Okay, he doesn't make any arrangement for you. This is what I learned from an instructor actually in Montgomery, Alabama. You got to make an appointment. You need to tell your friends what day you're coming and what time you're coming for dropping in. We find it pretty odd. Maybe, as I said, that is a distinctive culture we all have. Maybe time for you is very precious, limited. We are a bit more flexible. We are a little bit more rigid with the time. I think that is the most distinctive thing that I learned actually about cultural differences. Married life, not much different. Everywhere, everybody, parents be yelling at kids, very normal. Once in a while, parents quarrel, very normal. As long as you know how to pick it up and come back, don't let it slide into the pool. Okay, next. Sorry.
So did you notice like any like lingering racism almost because you were in the deep south?
In school, I don't see the difference because we have black instructors, we have white instructors, and we have black colleagues, college mates. They're not different at all. And we speak to each other, kind of thing. Underlying that, I cannot more or less foresee, if they have any difference. Because short period of time, you can pick it up very much. Because you go from class to class, you don't stay long enough to see anything cropping up.
Would you say that US culture like had an effect on Malaysian culture at all? Or if or maybe did like the British have a bigger effect on the Malaysian culture?
Not really, actually. Culturally, our Asian culture was very intact. Family is very important. Always have a family reunion, no matter what. Children will always stay with the family. Even though you're married, the parents will like you to stay with them. It's only until very recently, most children would like to stay away from parents. And I think that is good. This will allow them to develop and build their own relationship with a new partner and family without parental interference. Because parents will always input what's best for the children. So in that aspect, I think we are a bit different from you guys. If I can remember correctly or shared correctly by someone, you prefer independence and individualism more. You want to be on your own, right? You don't want the umbilical cord to be tied to you forever, kind of thing. So the slightest chance you have, boom, you're out of the house and you stay on your own. In Asia, not so much. Until very recently, quite a number are more or less staying on their own, especially when they're working. They like to stay closer to the place of work, rather than stay with their family, although it saves cost a lot, That's when our son wants to stay on their own. We say no, even though he's working. Initially start working because we said we rent a room, we pay a cost. You have a car, you have to pay the loan. You have office clothes, you have to pay money. You have your food. You said after you receive your pay, you got nothing left, minus. You got minus money left for any savings, you know. So for the time being, you calculate for yourself whether you're going to stay or you're going to go. So he decided to stay with us until more or less can establish himself and stay on his own. So you're thinking about staying on your own soon? You're going to college, right? You're staying on your own, right? Or you're staying from home?
I'm staying in a dorm, yes.
You staying in the dorm. Good, make new friends. You say like me going to military college, you know? You stay in the dorm, make new friends.
And then another question really quick. This one just didn't really fit anywhere else in the series of them, but in the pre-interview, you mentioned how you were let's see, I think it was a Buddhist, and then you converted to Catholicism.
Yeah.
What was your reasoning for that, and how did you do it?
Buddhism actually is not a religion. It's a
Right.
philosophy or way of life. I was quite comfortable with it because it teaches you about the right and the wrong, and you choose a middle path to better yourselves, and you don't be helpful to other people and not to be stab anybody in the back kind of thing. Okay? It's a good philosophy to follow. Capitalism came to being is there's something within you, asking the question of who is God. Even in my primary school days, somebody brought me to the gospel hall and trying to get me into Christianity. I used my head that time to rationalize a lot of things. You know, how can God create the world in 7 days and everything else? So to me, using the head, no solution to question. All right. I use your heart is a bit more softer, trying to guide you to a way, not seek deeper meaning to what you're seeking. Even when I was in the military and when we do go into the jungle for a period of time to learn jungle survival, and when you do your what nature calls, you always ask for forgiveness to somebody that you do not know. That you're not peeing on somebody, and he may be offended, and you be maybe curse for it kind of thing. So that one started more or less the search for something that's much deeper. So when I used my heart, I went on a journey of finding out what I'm looking for. We went to the Baptist church, we went to the gospel hall, we went to the gospel assembly hall, and we went to the Catholic church. When I entered the Catholic church, at that time I felt a kind of calmness within me. So that is when I more or less decided that that is the religion I want to go into. Right? I was baptized in 1991 with it to the tail end of my military career. I left in 1993, and Catholicism has helped me a lot in my new way of thinking about life and family life in particular, about relationship, how to handle in many aspects. Communications, I learned, is the key to almost every aspect of relationship. You have to talk. You cannot keep within yourself. Nobody will know what you are feeling, although I'm engaged a little bit of what you are thinking, not what you are feeling. That one helps me a lot, and because of Catholicism, my wife and I was involved in a program called Marriage Encounter for many years, which allowed us to meet other couples from other countries because of the leadership in Malaya and leadership in Asia. We travel quite a bit to know other parts of the world, and relationships are no different regardless of the color, regardless of your religion. Relationship is the key factor between couples and within families. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so what was it like? What's it like being a Catholic in a majority Muslim country?
Here in Malaysia in particular, we cannot express too freely about our religion. We cannot convert any Muslim, okay, or Malay into Christianity, but they can convert all of us to become Muslim. Okay, so it's a kind of one-sided affair because there's so many rules and regulations. We can get ourselves into trouble. We can even be imprisoned as well. This is Malaysia, but in Indonesia, there is a big difference. They can convert each other. Here in this country, you cannot marry a Muslim unless you convert to become a Muslim. Okay? In Indonesia, you can marry without conversion. You can marry different religion. Instead, like in Israel, Palestinians can marry a Jew. That kind of thing. But here
Is
they
that like
can't.
is that like the what you were saying before with the royal family controlling religion?
Yeah. Actually, they're supposed to be a figurehead of the religion. They do not control religion. The politician established a body to control religion. Okay, it came out with so kind of instructions and so kind of religious law. You know? You can get anybody who don't obey to be in charge. And our royalties sometimes follow totally because they are majority. So more or less they got to comply with it, especially for politics. You know? Especially for politics. Okay.
And then just one last question, for me at least, on Catholicism and Buddhism. So as somebody who's practiced both and experienced both, do you think they're compatible, I guess, together?
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem because Buddhism teaches you right and wrong, except there's no God. In Catholicism, you have a God also tell you this is right and wrong. In Catholicism, is more or less emphasis is on love. Okay, if you love one another, less problem will arise, and you become more charitable. It's your heart speaking, you know, not your head speaking. Buddhism is a head in a way, but it's so more or less like flexible. They do recognize the right and the wrong. If you recognize the wrong, you don't do the wrong, and you follow the right. Basically, religion teaches us all of us to be right in our approach to life. I have been baptized now for about, since 1991. Today is 2021, 30 years. I find no problem with that. Live by the Catholic requirements to be faithful to God. Like today is Ascension Day. It's a day of obligation. So I get up early, attend Mass before I attend to you. So I fulfill 2 requirements. You know? Your own decision, actually. Basically, I think it's right, it's right. Religion is a very, very sensitive subject in this country, you know, because of the country's law. So we do not talk very much. That the church services, but now it's locked down. We can't even do that. With a virtual attendance actually on Mass, you know, it's not the same thing. Because if you truly believe in the body and blood, virtual is not the true thing. You need to feel it. You need to feel it going down your throat. So you're really having Jesus within you. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Okay, next question. Although you said that's the last.
Yeah, I think that was the last question that I had. Unless if you have anything else, Xander.
No, that covered all of it for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it helps you in this sharing. You know, I think it can cover a very big spectrum. From the time I'm born to the time I'm here, and where I'm going, I do not know.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be very interesting just to see the differences between like life in the US and life in Malaysia. I think it's very interesting to have just another perspective from the world.
Definitely, yeah. I thought this was pretty cool. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. I hope it helps you getting a bigger horizon in your vision and thinking. You know, I'm lucky in a way because I've been trained locally, I've been trained overseas, I visit a lot of countries and I see different cultures, how they live, you know, the poor, the rich, and the not so rich, different lifestyles, different perspectives. I enjoy your fine dining. I enjoy my local food. So when you have a chance to come, or you have a chance in America to eat some local food, try it. It may not be the same from what we experience here, though, because that one has been catered for your taste, not our taste. You know, I remember this when I was after the training, we had through a dinner for our instructors in graduation, and we went to a Chinese restaurant and we had Chinese meal, and they shared with us is how come it tastes so different from when they come in and order themselves. We go to the cook, we cook like what we taste, not what we want the British to taste. So it's different. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you,
Yep.
Xander. Thank you, Patrick. Hope you have
Thank
a
you.
nice night. I have a nice day. You have a nice night.
You have a nice day. Yeah.
Good night now for you. Good night.